introduce themselves. So I will start with Chris. Go ahead.
All right, audio. Chris Bonaff with NAMI Oregon.
And another member of the steering committee, Heather.
Hi, Heather Jeffress with the Oregon Council for Behavioral Health. Thank you.
Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl Ramirez with the Association of Oregon Community Mental Health Programs.
And do we have, is Anne on yet? The other member of our steering committee? Anne.
Hi, Anne Ford with EOCCO in Gobi.
Great. And then Samantha, you are a member of this, informal member of the steering committee.
I am. Rep Nose, thank you for being here. You know me well. Samantha Shepard, CCO Oregon.
And this is Diana Bianco with Artemis Consulting, and along with Kathy Kaufman, helped to bring this group together.
Oh, okay. And so you're the two that the money that we allocated hired to help make this happen.
We're the two.
That's who we are.
Excellent. Okay, great.
Kathy, do you want to take it from here, and then we'll turn it over to Representative Nose?
Yeah, I think we'll just turn it over. Representative Nose, we've had some questions from members among the group. Really anxious to hear from you to get some guidance around the scope of this work group. So that's one of the key things we'll ask you to speak to. But otherwise, the group has just begun, and I think just appreciates your leadership on this issue and looks forward to hearing your insight and your remarks to them as they embark on this.
Sure. So for those of you that I have not had the pleasure of meeting, you've already heard my name. I'm the state representative for House District 42, which is inner Southeast Portland, and a little sliver of inner Northeast Portland. I've been in the legislature for about a decade, and I've done a variety of things in the legislature, but most recently I've been doing a lot of behavioral health and healthcare budget and policy. And one of the things I've heard loud and clear, I feel like from at least half of you on this Zoom over the years, is that there are just so many regulations and bureaucratic requirements, and I hate to use the word bureaucratic, but we all understand what I mean when I say that get in the way of you delivering care or providing more care, because people have forms and certain kinds of charting to fill out that maybe you don't think is very valuable, but somebody else does, or you're questioning why you have to do this and you've never had a good explanation. Or even worse, I think sometimes people feel like there are multiple documents that kind of accomplish the same thing, but with different reporting requirements to different entities out here in our sort of unorganized world of healthcare and behavioral health in the state of Oregon and the United States. So, and sadly, I think the way that I've tried to talk about this with some of my colleagues in the legislature is that as difficult as it is to stand up a new thing, it can also be just as difficult to sort of say, what are these things that we're currently doing could we stop doing? Because, you know, a report that's Christy McKinney, I see you on my screen here, so I'll pick on you. A report that's really important to Christy McKinney, Amy Baker, I know I'm going to see you pretty soon up the coast, I think, is a thing that Amy Baker cannot stand doing. And how do we get all of the entities together? So I'm delighted that we hired a facilitator, two of them, it sounds like, to sort of help us say, okay, what is the information the state, an agency needs to justify the program, to show results, to show taxpayers how we're spending their dollars wisely or getting a result, versus what's the thing that's getting in the way of just tracking everything as opposed to providing care and getting services to people, and maybe even because it's tedious, costs too much money to do, or is taking money away that could be delivered to somebody to provide care or maybe be paid better. You get the idea. So Samantha, I feel like maybe you and Cheryl Ramirez and Heather Jeffers and I have been at this for 4 years. We finally got a bill funded to pull all of you together to examine things that you're doing that maybe don't add value or could be streamlined. And to the extent that you are able to come up with a list of recommendations, I'll take as many as you can vet. We have a vehicle ready, Alex Fallman, my chief of staff, who's on this Zoom with me, we have a placeholder bill, as we sometimes call them, for those of you that aren't familiar with legislative parlance, where basically we will file a bill that will pop out in January, unless you get a lot of things done before September, that says study behavioral health operations in the state of Oregon. We'll come up with something a little bit, but basically it'll be a bill. And some of you people who don't know what that is will go, what does Representative Noss want to study? Absolutely nothing. I'm waiting for you to bring to me your ideas that you have vetted that we then turn into an amendment to the bill. It'll be a gut and stuff, as they say. And the real things that you want changed or done differently will populate that study bill with the things that you studied between now and hopefully the start of the legislative session. So that's the hope, that you're going to come up with some things that are barriers to care or getting in your way or making the job more difficult to do than it should be. And you're going to get those to me at some point before January. And then we're going to go to work and see what we can get passed and vetted through the Oregon Health Authority, other entities that weren't a part of this, coordinated care organizations in our counties, and then and make some changes that will make this all work a lot better.
Representative Noss, thank you so much. Deborah, I see you have your hand up. I imagine you want to ask about scope. I know that's been an area of concern. So we have Representative Noss for another 5 minutes, so maybe as briefly as possible.
Absolutely. Thank you, Representative Noss. I just wanted to ask, I totally understand the administrative burden aspect of this work group. We've had a lot of discussion about how since CCO or CCOs were created and created a lot of overlap with the CMHP duties in statute.
Yep.
And
yes.
We never went back and looked at what was the overlap. My question is whether is the CCO structure that was set up the newer structure that we are adapting the CMHP structure into, and therefore it'll change. I guess let me make it more broader. Is the scope broader than administrative burdens in that we are looking at what do the different public entities who provide behavioral health services, what are they each required to do and not do? So that would include CCOs, CMHPs, community corrections, CCBHCs, and other entities that provide public behavioral health services. Because what you just said, I didn't really hear that broad of a scope, and maybe I misunderstood what the scope of this statute was, of this bill was.
Sam, I'm trying to remember. It feels like that's something we talked about in 492 and 40, right? Like where there's overlap.
Absolutely. Yes, totally. And to the question about different provider types, and Heather, if you want to comment as well, because I know we've answered this question several times together. As far as different provider types, the Oregon Council of Behavioral Health, the general CCO model, the AOCMHP model in the counties and the hospitals is the entire system. So that includes PCPCHs, school-based health centers, rural clinics, FQHCs, and CCBHCs. That was hard for me today.
I mean,
so it's all one place. It's just a different payment structure.
So here would be my one bit of caution, which is if you're going to try to unpack whether the public health system or the CCO system or the community mental health program should do the thing, or we should share it better in some way, I would just say, I wouldn't focus there first. I would focus on the things that are sort of irritants to the job, barriers to delivering care, things that suck up a lot of time that maybe don't add value. I would try to focus on those first so that we can get those things in front of the legislature as quickly as possible. And then to the extent that you have longer range things about, could we figure this out or could we do something different? Like, then I would say get to those. I will also say this, there will be an opportunity probably twice this summer and early fall, probably just summer, to meet with me and a bunch of other coordinated care organization types and behavioral health providers, public health providers, primary care providers, people who care about the Oregon Health Plan and the people that are on it, to offer insight into like what could be done differently in that space to make the model work better. I've had a couple of different. Sorry, there's suddenly a lot of traffic out here. Can everybody still hear me?
Yep, you're good. Thank you.
Okay. So I've called it a couple of different things throughout the year, CCO 3.0, but I think at this point I'm settling in on sort of a CCO salon where we get together and jawbone about what's working in the model and what should be different, and pitch potential legislative ideas. So Deborah, back to your question, if you've got a specific thing already in mind that you think should be done, you're welcome to come to one of those meetings and pitch your idea. But if it's more complicated, you might want to work it through this.
Okay, thank you so much.
Janice?
So Rep No's apologies. I'm in a moment of fatigue with addressing admin burden, so I'm probably going to be not super positive. We're struggling. We're not getting there. We are being told
this is the point of the bill, right? I mean, that's why this process is, this is what we passed to try to get over the struggle.
Well, we're having lots of meetings and I am finding it to continue to be a struggle. And I am not seeing that the will that I hear from leadership, yourself or Ebony, who's fabulous, or Krista, is making its way into the nuts and bolts work. So what I am experiencing, and I'm just going to speak for myself, is practical, real suggestions are being met with all of the rules that make it impossible to do the thing. And that feels like a circle that I am about to step off. I have put 2 years of work into this, and I just need you to hear that I am not seeing the level of change I think we deserve and can expect. I'm not sure what it's going to take, but I just, you are not in this room with me very often, and I need that to be heard.
Okay.
And
I mean,
you know,
Janice, I guess I thought this was going to be the process to try to break through that.
There are other processes. I'm not sure we're getting there. And there are rules rolling out today that go against the very commitments we made right now that we will have to undo in the next round. So if we can't stop that from happening, we are wasting people's energy and time. And I may be wrong.
I mean, maybe there needs to be a change in the way we do administrative rules.
Maybe.
That feels very hard as well, to be honest with you.
I know. Rep knows that respectfully, I don't think it's going to happen without that. And I just, I'm concerned about these smart people at the table working very hard, and we're making such incremental change while we're still building more rules on the back end. I don't know how to stem the flood. All
right. Well, again, I don't either, because I don't live in your world on a day-to-day basis the way that you all do. Again, that's why you hired Diana and Kathy, I assume, to help you figure out how to do this. Okay, I see Robin Henderson. Well, I mean, I wouldn't spend your time trying to reform the rulemaking process, because then you don't get to talk about the things that are getting in your way. But maybe there's other entities out there that care about the rulemaking process that think it's a burden, not just in the health space, but in lots of other spaces as well. And to the extent that a coalition forms that makes something different in rulemaking, that would be intriguing, I think, to legislators. This is slightly off the subject, but Representative Ben Bowman is interested in trying to figure out how to improve the legislature's ability to have oversight and accountability, and not in a sort of gotcha way, but in a way that is saying, are we implementing the things that we pass? Are we doing a good job with the programs that we have? You know, what does it take to have our agencies have what they need to be able to do things? And maybe changing the rulemaking process is one of those things. Maybe changing the way we do fiscals is one of those things, because I feel like the legislature in their attempt to pass bills, spends a lot of time figuring out how we could spend as little money as possible to accomplish the task, including this one. You know, we worked really hard to get the fiscal down. And sometimes we delegate rulemaking because the legislature doesn't want to deal with the tedium of a policy. And we're also not the experts.
Thanks, Rep. Nose.
Rep. Nose, thank you so much for sharing some time with this work group as it begins this big effort, and also for all of your leadership on what I know is an incredibly important issue for everybody around this Zoom table.
Okay, you know, as you make progress, you know, feel free to reach out and schedule a meeting with me and say, okay, this is what we need in our bill. Okay.
Will do.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. I'll see some of you at the beach here later this week.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, now I got to figure out how to hang up.
Okay. So, our agenda for today, we're planning to pick up where we left off in our last meeting. I think everybody felt that this kind of high-level preliminary review of rules was helpful. So we're going to pick up towards the end of the 430s and then begin to tackle the 414s. But before we do that, I just want to check in and see if there's some conversation that we need to have about new rules that have just dropped.
And I think the question is, do they need to somehow be integrated into this? I mean, so we're looking at the 430s and the 414s, but this is the first time I think we're hearing about there's all these new rules, and we're looking at statutes, right? Like we're looking at the 430s and the 414s and want to be, and one of the reasons for having representative notes is to be really as clear as possible on scope, because we've been hearing lots of different things. And so want to be sure that we're acting in service to all of you and the statute and this process. So let's just,
And like one clear thing I'm hearing both from Janice's comments and from what I'm seeing in the chat, it sounds like one of the key issues that we need to flag and make sure we really attend to in both the initial and final recommendations is this issue of what happens with recommendations. We don't want them to just sort of be submitted and then not move forward. So can we build in a process where recommendations are tracked, what's been implemented, what hasn't, what are barriers to things being implemented, is there some unexpected fiscal, et cetera, so that there is more of a closed loop around the feedback of folks like you around the table.
Go ahead, Justin.
I just wanted to expand on my comment in the chat a little bit. So the tab looked at why OHA creates rules. We ran that through Dana Hiddle at the time, and she kind of agreed, here's the reason why rules are created, and here's why, or how the workflow looks. I do think this is sort of at the crux of this regulatory conversation, the whole certificate of approval process. Why does that exist? Why do we have to have rules to implement new policy or to regulate? That whole conversation needs to be right at the heart of our regulatory reform conversation. And none of that is spelled out in statute. So that is not something that we will address by tweaking something in ORS 430. It's a conversation this group needs to be really intentional about to figure out how we want to regulate the behavioral health system in the future.
Thanks, Justin. Go ahead, Janice.
I was just thinking of examples of new rules. I mean, I was just in, we just received the Behavioral Health Resource Network rules. And when I raised concerns about some of the contradictions in those rules, what I heard is, well, we did vet them against other rules internally. And well, your comments don't really apply because substance use disorder treatment rules aren't the same as mental health treatment rules. I understand that. I've been part of this system for a while. Maybe that's something we need to fix instead of always using it as an explanation for why people's very real feedback is not valid. It is crazy making to provide services with multiple different sets of rules that apply differently to the same people. So that's one example. Another example is I was in another room with another staff member where we talked about a requirement in residential treatment programs and finally got a concession and literally was told with a smile in that same context, well, that's great because get ready, we're about to lay some more rules down. So I'm just here to say, where is the timeout moment? Where is the timeout moment? It has to happen. I am not seeing it. And we have two wonderful facilitators here. That's awesome. And if we provide yet another set of well thought out, collaboratively evolved and developed recommendations that are simply ignored, you're going to lose the trust and the will of the provider community. I'm about there. So just saying.
Makes
And there are
sense.
more. There are many more.
Yeah.
Thanks, Janice. Go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, I was just gonna add on to what Janice was saying. I mean, I'm gonna look at the crisis service rules that have to be done on this railroad track, this train that's going down of come hell or high water, we're gonna have rules by September because the legislature said we had to. And they're rules for a service that is not well defined. We don't have a path to pay for. We don't have the ability to figure out what kind of building it's going to be in, what code it goes up to. The draft rules that they gave us were so bad, so stunningly bad. I think we collectively told them they needed to go back to the drawing board and come up with something different, but it's damn the torpedoes because the legislature says we need them by September. I would have liked to have asked Rob Nose, Representative, can you please put a suspension on the creation of new rules until we finish this process? Anything like that, because it seems insane to me to sit in, it is what now, July, and those rules are supposed to roll for the crisis sitters in September. That's insane. So it's very frustrating. I'm referring to the behavioral health crisis, what do we call it? The BHC SAC or whatever it is. Those rules that were just really difficult. So I'd like to advocate for a wholesale suspension of the process right now.
Thanks, Robin. I see Anne and then Danielle and then Amy.
Sure. So I just want to bring up an example, a really concrete example of this is the 309022 rules. We provided a set of feedback on that rule, I think 2 or 3 years ago now, and we literally been locked onto one single element of our feedback for this entire time, and we've not been able to move across anything. We've gotten zero progress on the 22s, and so, and at the same time, more rule sets are just rolling out around the same topic. So I just to echo what everybody else is saying, I think we do have to have some suspension in this because we're not even getting our feedback answered for the rules that we put in the first time. Like we're so far beyond this, like we have 2 more rule sets that have come out in the meantime. So it's hard to keep planning for what we're doing at the same time sets are coming out with zero feedback.
Thanks, Anne.
Just to add another bit of evidence, for lack of a better way to put it, the new 30907 tool rules around mobile crisis are the same thing, right? Like we've all, between the CCOs and the CMHPs, provided feedback. We just had a meeting last week that created some challenges in what the CCO BH directors are seeing as the ability for the 2-person mobile crisis rules and what OHA is seeing. So I think that just another example of this ongoing challenge of rule sets being created, there being feedback, and the rules get pushed forward and pushed out anyway.
Thanks, Danielle. Amy.
I think the challenge with rules in general, and I kind of agree with Justin, is that I think we need to have a better understanding of what the purpose of the rules are. And I think there's still some disagreement as to whether having Oregon administrative rules, whether those set the floor that entities should not go below, or if they're meant to try to enact quality of care, which I don't believe rules are capable of doing. I think that's part of the dilemma, is the understanding what exactly the rules are going to do. And Janice is right. Like, if at some point there are so many rules that have the potential to create harm, then we're going to stop doing all of them. And I don't think OHA wants that. I don't think we want that. I mean, all of us want a floor. So I think it's like agreeing to what's the purpose of the rule. And then the second is the vetting process. Like, we have to understand what the unintended consequences are, because there are always unintended consequences. And if there's no way to vet that, or have, like, whoever the person is who's responsible for the rule process see what that unintended consequence is, then you're going to come up with something that has the potential to do harm. So I think those two things kind of have to be in place. And then the last thing I'll say is that I think to write Oregon administrative rules, you kind of have to be a special person. No offense to the people who write rules, but like, you really have to be good at like getting into the weeds and the details of things. And sometimes what happens is you have people who are really good at that, but they're not tapping into the big picture in terms of like what it is that we want to accomplish and achieve as a system. And so if the rules are disconnected from the big picture, then sometimes you get a set of rules that don't necessarily accomplish what you want them to accomplish.
Thanks, Amy. Good summary. Okay, I'm hearing you all loud and clear, right? I mean, it sounds like, number one, this is incredibly frustrating because here you are again being asked to give your limited time to a process around developing recommendations to improve rules. At the same time, new rules are coming at you and you're feeling frustrated about nothing happening with recommendations you've already spent time giving. So we don't want to lose that. It sounds like that's got to be one of the key, something addressing that has to be one of the key recommendations that come out of this group, whether it be in December or in the 2025 recommendations. But we are capturing that and hear you that is a major, not a minor issue. And we need some kind of process and guardrails to move things forward in a better way than they have to date. I'm also hearing this issue that Justin and Amy and others are flagging, that it's a question of, number one, what's the intent of rule? It's real hard to regulate quality. So it sounds like we ought to have some conversation and see if we have consensus on really what is the purpose of rules. So we'll capture that in our work plan as well. Chris.
I'm just going to throw a usual caveat out that some people who have been meeting with in the tab have heard me ad nauseum say. While I hear the frustration, rules are the only place that those of us who avail ourselves of the system can articulate anything. Otherwise, there is no place to interject in the process. And so while I sympathize with you can't regulate quality through rules, if you don't articulate in the rules, then there is no place where they're articulated that the public can participate in. And then I would just remind that one person's administrative burden is another person's guarantee of protection or quality or whatever that is. I think it's the nuance is what's sort of missing these days. And I would share sort of the frustration. A number of us collaborated for the first time ever. I mean, it was Cheryl, me, Janice, a number of people to jointly submit comments on mobile crisis rules, recognizing that those rules we're way out in front of whatever we could finance, let alone deploy, and yet we have rules and contracts that are divorced from reality, even when we join together. And so that, I think that's from my perspective and Nami's perspective, I think that's where our frustration lies in this process and overlaps with others.
Thanks, Chris. Really important note, right? And we don't have to choose between those things. I'm confident this is a really smart group and we can figure out a better path forward without letting go of caring about the folks who need to access services and making sure that their needs are at the top of the list, not at the bottom. Janice.
I am sympathetic to what Chris is saying. I think my concern is that if the rulemaking is the only place for consumer voice to be present, then we actually need to look at that. Because frankly, rulemaking is such a complex process. What I've observed is that often consumers are sitting in that room with like not enough ability to understand how that rule may be playing out on the ground. And I also think, and again, I don't know every organization, I know mine, so I can only speak about mine, but we have meaningful involvement of people with lived experience through our advisory boards, through our system of care entities. And those are folks who know our community intimately, have been through our services, understand directly how they're impacted, and that input is incredibly valuable. So I just don't want to operate with this assumption that there's only one way to get people who are using our services involved. I think there may be actually better, richer, more effective, more meaningful ways to get folks involved. And maybe that's at the contracting level, and maybe it's at advisory levels. And I'm not saying not in rulemaking, but rulemaking has become so complex. I'm not even sure people, like, it takes a professional level person with lived experience to even understand the complexity of the rules. So it's become a barrier in and of itself to meaningful engagement. And again, that's my perspective.
Yeah, now you and I have talked about this ad nauseum,
Yeah.
so I won't do it, but I share that frustration. Again,
yeah.
You know, it's the uniformity of things. You know, I would agree, you know, it'd be nice to be able to add, you know, see, OHA has twice accepted public comment on model contracts for CCOs. They also did that for the call centers. It would be nice, you know, I agree there are other ways, but I just want to throw that out there as that in a public system, this is the only area for formal public participation where you can see the influence you may have had by sharing what input you have with OHA in the final promulgation of rules.
Yeah, I hear that.
Excellent. Laura Rose.
Hi, thank you to that. I just want to add, you know, when you think about people with lived experience, though, don't make assumptions in all cases. My background is public policy and administration. I've had years of legislative advocacy, implementation, rulemaking, follow-up. I've been at many tables, many discussions, budget, all kinds of other levels. So just because somebody has lived experience doesn't mean they don't have the capacity to definitely participate meaningfully at this level. It just depends on, you know, what their background is. Yes, there's time to learn, of course, but I just want to put that word out there because I really believe in access for all as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for calling that out. Okay, really good, important conversation. Thank you for elevating these things. It's really helpful for Diana and I to hear because we want to make sure that we build out a work plan that's really going to get you what you want and desperately need. So with that, why don't we get back to rolling up our shirt sleeves? Take a breath. Let's just believe that we are going to make something come out of this process, including recommendations to help you all with the frustrations that you're feeling right now, which are completely understandable. But Diana, are you able to?
I'm gonna pull it up.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
but I
leave
see
it
Heather. Heather
Yeah,
Kathy's gonna be note taker. We're gonna do what we did last time. We got feedback from a number of you that that was a useful undertaking. So we're gonna start with, and Heather, I'm gonna get you 1 sec. So I'm gonna pull them up, the most recent statutes. We sent links in the email that Kathy sent out a week ago. Go ahead, Heather, please.
I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the conversation, and just wanted to circle back to what Rep. Nose shared with us. It's always good for me when we dive in, roll up our elbows, sleeves over our elbows, to have a quick reorientation. And I was just thinking, okay, as I'm thinking about this in statute, where do we have opportunities to make recommendations that are new, that aren't in there yet, that better match? Where do we have opportunities to, I loved, he said, subtract things or condense things or remove things? And then where do we have opportunities to lift consumer experience and voice in the trajectory of moving the system to more equitable access and sustainable equitable access? So that's what I just wanted to throw that out there as we dive in. I'm reminding myself, because it's easy to get caught in the avalanche of change that's been happening over the last 2-3 years. So I appreciate it. Everybody, that's all. I was like, I'm thinking it, maybe it's okay to share it. Thank you for letting me share.
Okay. Thanks so much. So we're gonna start moving through again, and just as a reminder, I think, I don't know that everybody was here last time, but that we are marching through the 430s and then the 414s as a starting point per this group's recommendation. So we're just gonna keep going. And we are at 430-306. I'm going to pull that up. We sent this out just as a reminder about a week ago and asked folks to please spend some time looking at these. We'll keep going in the way, like, so for example, and this is, we're starting here where I've highlighted. And for example, we talked about definitions. We may need, and Kathy's going to take notes, we may need a definition subgroup. So we're not going to spend, and we're not right now, and again, just as a reminder, saying, well, this is a good idea, or that's a bad idea, or I don't want to do that, or we should do that. It is lifting up the issues, sort of highlighting, like, you know, the classic is some of these definitions are out of date, terribly out of date. And so we know that that's a theme.
And terms, definitions and terms.
Terms,
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. Definitions and terms, yes, are out of date and need to be revised. But just as we go through, just invite folks to sort of chime in about each of these sections, not debating them, but what are the major issues that are coming up for folks. And the other thing I'm going to do, we got a request for this, is before we move on from each section, you all know that there are a number of voting members on this group, and then non-voting members who are not only listening in, but also invited to share input. So we invite input from everybody. That's why we have y'all here. And we've gotten a request to make sure before we sort of move on to ask, like, do any voting members want to chime in here to ask that global question? So we will, you might get tired of hearing me say that, but I'm going to sort of just try to remember to say that at the end of each section. Okay. So 430-306, definitions. Terms and definitions. Yes, Heather, I see you in the chat. All the substance use definitions need to be lifted to ASAM 4 criteria and SAMHSA language. Thank you. Anne, please.
And maybe this is the part, I guess, could we just ask a general request of OHA that maybe they take the ownership of going in and updating some of this really offensive old language? Because I don't know that's the best use of our time to go through and catch all this.
So, and we did, the steering committee made that request, and I talked to the health authority about it last week, and they are considering it. And so we have that opportunity, and we've also talked about maybe having a smaller work group of this group coming up with some terms and definitions. So we have both of those in mind. So we've already made that request to the health authority.
So given this, I mean, I guess I would just say this whole section needs to be under consideration. I mean, I think any definitions we need to just leave under consideration.
Great, perfect. That's great. Any other, please, Colleen.
Hi, this is Colleen. So I'm at OHA ODHS. Just as a reminder, these are Oregon revised statutes, not Oregon administrative rules. So I know some of you that's way obvious and we remember and know. But for those who don't know, these are written by the legislature. So OHA doesn't write them. They're written for all of you and the programs that are impacted by these. So I would love to see, like, make sure we get your thoughts rather than jumping completely on it and having OHA like be the ones that say, we think these mean things. And I think I saw Heather's comment in there about where to grab like the more current and updated, statutory definitions of these, but would love.
Colleen, can I just check?
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. Can I just check too? I know the group has also flagged that there have been some updates made in the OARs.
Yeah, there's updates all the time. OHA has 18 chapters, 19 chapters of rules.
But if there have been updates in the OARs, maybe step one is just getting those.
So this is the unique thing is that OHA doesn't have the authority to usually change legislation and statutes. We can't widen definitions.
Right, but this group is going to make recommendations, and any changes that have to the legislature and any changes that have it just saves a step and makes sure that things are lined up. So maybe that's a starting ask.
Yeah, I think the ask of that I made to John and Krista and Dave last week was, would they be willing to take the first shot? It has to come back to this group. And then this group is making the registry recommendations, not the health authority. So it wouldn't be a legislative concept from the health authority or anything like that. Would come out of this group. So we're using smaller work groups. And that was one of the ideas.
Yeah, and I was just going to echo that, where I think, the health authority has done a lot of work over the years of updating language and making sure the definitions and the administrative rules have been updated. So if we could just get from the health authority or get some help from the health authority, like, these are the definitions we've updated. We have all this done. You all don't have to look at this.
That's exactly it. Thank you, Anne. Go ahead, Heather.
Sorry, I was just going to take my hand down. I don't have anything additional to add. The only little complication is that there's some places like this happens to be this SUD one. Colleen, correct me if I'm wrong, where the most recent iteration of 18 months of rulemaking in SUD does not reflect ASAM 4. So they're going to unfortunately have to go back and do all that again. Is that where we're at? Okay, I'm not wrong still. Okay. And so there are a little weird. So I really appreciate and I like the proposal. That's all I was going to say, is that I think it's important for this group to support Colleen and her team, because they're like this SUC, it's easy. We have ASAM 4, it's published. We have SAMHSA definitions. It's simple, Simon. We just have to sit down and do it.
Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that I think we're all getting on the same page here, but to Colleen's questions and where we're going. So we do have a legislative vehicle that we will be able to put our recommendations in. So we're not asking OHA to override the legislative process by any means to change statutes. And then I think in addition to the definitions, as well, I presume that I know that we've updated other statutes already to move away from things like drug abusers, or even using things like Native American and making sure we're using Indian or whatever is the correct word. But those are things that just doesn't feel like that we as subject matter experts need to spend time talking about, since they're already decided by DAS or DOJ, quite frankly, or OHA, because they've just already been defined in other places. So I think taking that first edit would just allow us to focus on the content that we really need to focus on versus the words that I don't think we need to get semantical debates about.
Thank you. So we will circle back. Samantha, did you mean to put your hand back up? Oh, okay. We will circle back with the health authority on this and again, the idea is to flag some of these things that have been updated in OARs or being updated other places so that there's consistency. And then the work group would take it in and review it and move forward. So that's the ask, and we'll sort of see where that goes. And if not, Kathy and I have some ideas about using a smaller work group to do that work. Okay, so that's how we're handling this section. We're going to go down to this section 315. Any feedback? Any feedback on this, folks? And if not, it's okay. We don't have to have feedback on every section, but gonna go for it, Chris.
Well, I don't know that this needs to be changed or anything, but this language bugs the hell out of me. In that we're going to give you the least costly unless something we find contraindicates that. And I would like to, not that it's within our purview, but everywhere else in statute, what we're talking about is getting people what they need based on what's indicated. And so it would be nice to modernize this language, potentially if we have the bandwidth to do that.
Thank you. Molly.
I'm going to echo what Chris just said. I'm not a provider, so I access your system and I access all of that. And this is incredibly difficult and offensive for somebody in the justice system to try to figure out. And I could not find something similar to this in the medical healthcare system. It's simply in the behavioral health, actually SUD system. So that I would just echo that.
Great. Thanks, Molly. Heather.
Yeah, as OCBH members who provide substance use disorder services, whether they're regardless of if they have a CMHP contract or they're just a COA or whatever, this is really antiquated, inappropriate language and does not include the expansion of CCOs. And so it really needs to either just go away and then be part of the CCO and other types of contracting responsibilities at the CMHP level or county level or whomever. This is a vestige of a very old way a system was operated that we don't have anymore. So it's a real good example of maybe a subtraction that is better stated in some other places and in the opinion of many OCBH members.
That's great feedback. Thank you. And good feedback in the really helpful feedback in the chat as well that we're capturing. Thank you. Okay. 430-335. Anne.
I think this one needs to be updated to include the CCOs. This was written long before CCOs were around.
Great, thank you. And then before I move on from these sections, any voting members who haven't spoken up would like to share on any of the ones that we've talked about so far? Okay. Okay, we're down here at 338. Any feedback on this? Anne?
Just again, that they need to be updated to CCOs and look at any laws that, you know, aren't reflected in that. This just feels really old language again.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's this was written at a time when mostly government clinics were doing services, so that's not the reality of the system and how things are delivered currently. And then also, you know, we don't have any considerations in here about the 90-day expansion of Medicaid coverage into carceral settings either. So yeah, really out of date.
Go for it, Robin, and then Amy, I want to follow up with your comment in the chat. Go for it, Robin.
Well, I was basically going to say the same thing Amy was saying. But moreover, my question is, why do we need this section? I mean, where else do we put anything where we have a purpose of a law related to any type of physical health condition? So can we just strike this section of the law because it's just so bad?
Thank you. Other thought? I saw you got hand sparkles and head nodding. Anybody? Anybody want to offer any other comments before we move so on to the next section? Okay. Christy, can you just say what you, I just want to understand what you put in the chat.
I'm just afraid that if we've got a limited amount of time, and if we spend, I mean, I agree, this language is offensive to me as an addict, as someone in recovery, but I'm worried that we will get bogged down in this and not get to the things that can actually change admin burden. This is, yes, it's something that needs updated. I think we all know that, but I just am fearful we might spend too much time and changing language that I don't, and I'm not saying that it's not important. It's very important, but I think what we're here for is more important, right?
Really good note. Yeah, really good note, Christy. I think everybody's with you. This is just our first pass through, and we're just flagging. And then the next step is, what are the priorities that we want to focus on between now and December? What's on the 2025 list? What is on the list, but maybe beyond 2025?
Absolutely, absolutely. And if anyone wants to start a group to fix this, I'm in. So
thank you. Okay. Going to keep going. 430, 342. Amy Baker.
So I think this is one of the sections that's like, it's a little bit duplicative in terms of CCOs are required to have a community needs assessment and their own community advisory committee. Counties are required to have a local planning committee, and this one, it would be nice if there could be some symbiosis between those different requirements.
Yeah. Thanks for calling that out. And we, this has come up before, that there has to be some sort of chunk of work that looks at all of the committees and groups, and probably some kind of crosswalk that captures them. And I see you, Janice, and I also wanted to call out Caroline's comment about including tribes. And then, yes, Robin, to your question, is this a local planning committee that can sunset? I think that's part of all of this, is like, what is the purpose of each one of these committees? Are they time limited? What's the membership? Is there overlap? That kind of thing. Thank you. Go ahead, Janice.
I think this is another one that gets at this larger issue of the bifurcation of the substance use and the mental health treatment system. And I know that that's a big issue, and that may be one of those that, like Christy suggests, has to be set aside, but it is a primary driver of a lot of admin burden. We see very few people with only mental health conditions. We see very few people with only substance use disorder conditions. They overlap regularly, and we should be able to care for those individuals in the way they need in whatever setting they show up. So I just think, like, having a local planning commission around substance use treatment as if it's something different than treating people's health isn't making sense, and it complicates everything. I don't know where the right place is to address that, and for the life of me, I still can't figure out whether this is a CMS-driven issue or whether this is an Oregon rules-driven kind of system issue. But it'd be nice to get to the bottom of that.
Thanks, Janice. And then really appreciate that. And then also, I caught your comment in the chat, Cheryl, about making sure we're checking with the Alcohol, Drug, and Policy Commission as well on this. Anything before we move down to 430, 345, anything from voting members who have not yet had an opportunity to chime in?
I would just, Diane, I just hope I put the list of all the committees that I've found so far across the 430s and the 414s in the chat. I'm sure I've missed something, and there's some in there that we have talked about, that's the list I came up with. And I think this is a great opportunity for deleting, combining, and revisiting. Is this a thing? A concrete example is back in the day, I've served on several county LADPCs in my career. And at one point, we actually had grant funds that came through this. So this used to be a real structure, like Justin said, that approved some providers, had some ability to contract. And I don't think it's been that way statewide in a long time. So just, I think it's a good example of that.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Heather. Okay, we're at 4:30, 3:45. Any comments, things folks want to lift up here? Robin.
It seems like there's a number of these types of grants type things. Can we make a note of all these grants along with all these definitions that you'll see in the next session? And instead of having a separate one of them for each section, have just one that overarches for all of them so we don't have to be repetitive and then miss catching it up along the way. I mean, they're basically the same thing.
Yep, great, thank you. Great idea. Molly. Molly, we can't hear you.
I know, I'm trying to get my mouse to the one screen.
You got it.
So I think, you know, I think around these, I agree that this is something, some of these grants and some of these things that come along once in a while that got put into ORS and then somehow got memorialized in ORS. It should have been in rule, but it wasn't. And Caroline Cruz was my TA on the first LADPC I served on. But this is old. It's not current. And so I think that going through and figuring out which ones are do not have current funding streams is also potentially important because it confuses the process. So thank you.
No, great point. Thank you so much. And I'm just looking at some of the chats. Amy Baker, does that help on the statute that you were referring to, this one? Does that help what was just shared? Maybe an outdated grants program, we're not sure, but it sounds like that has to be screened, right?
Yeah, I mean, unless OHA needs that for some reason, like obviously the legislature gives OH money and obviously OHA like gives money out.
Yep, okay. Justin, thanks for that. Okay, so we're in a definitions section again, obviously terms and definitions that need to be updated here. Any other comments other than these terms and definitions need to be updated? And hopefully consistent, right, with what we've been talking about. Okay. Assistance and recommendation of local planning committee. This sounds like this is, I don't know if this is another.
These are those grants that I think these are those grants I was talking about. So this whole thing is tied to that.
Thing,
they
don't
really do that anymore. Yeah, and it was written, and that language is from 1987. So I don't even know if this is.
Yeah, it's worth going through because it sounds like, so this whole section, and does that, so this whole section above 357 right now sounds like it's old language, and that we need to see. Right. Oh, Deborah, great point. Thank you in the chat about, and we are going to have to look at this holistically before, recommendations. But is there, as we look at, let's see, I'm looking right, 338 to 380. All right, let's start here. 357. I think this is a new section. Any comments on this piece? All right, thanks, Molly. I see in the chat. See your comment in the chat. Anything on 358? Justin.
I would just encourage us to look at, oh, sorry, not 358. I was looking at the minimum standards rules, 357.
Okay,
Just
go for it. Yeah, go back up there. All good.
just applicability. A group of us were talking about this the other day, and right now the way a lot of these are written, it applies to the entire general population. So being a little bit more intentional about where the health authority should have authority, they should put rules and regulations in place. Kind of back to that whole thing. Is it really necessary for all Oregonians, or is it necessary for a subset of Oregonians or vulnerable populations or whatever? I think that warrants more discussion.
Yep, appreciate, yep, we have that whole bucket of things, so keep calling those out, really appreciate that, thank you. 43358, any comments here? $430,359. Okay. And
so 459, I would just, or 359, I'm sorry, I would just ask, maybe we need to take a look at this for the funding. Because I'm not, this, like, this doesn't include any CCO stuff. And so I'm not sure this is truly right anymore.
Good, thank you. Okay. All right. 362. I know this is tedious, folks, but this is I think we got to do it this way, and I appreciate folks.
This is another one. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Go for it, Heather.
This is another one of those that it's like, this is, you know, these services are funded by CCOs predominantly. I mean, not completely, not incomplete, but predominantly. So it needs to be reviewed for 2024 relevance. And also this was before the standard priority populations in Medicare and Medicaid. So that's why it's called out in the weird way that it's called out.
Great, thank you. $364. Looks like there might be some updating necessary here as well. $366. Again, needs for updates.
Yeah, update. I don't know if this is this happening anymore? I don't know if this is happening anymore. And if it's not, I would suggest we drop it.
Does anybody know if this is happening? Anybody from the health authority know if this is happening?
So this is Molly. I supervise our prevention program, and we have to submit this to somebody, but I don't know how it gets submitted, but we do this once a year or once a biennium, but it's very old.
Okay, so still don't, okay, thanks, that's very helpful.
This is really part of the CCO piece, and updated with that would make more sense. This is duplication.
Heather.
Yeah, good. Sorry. Thank you, Molly, for speaking up and saying you have to submit a report to this still. That's what we're looking for. I was just going to say, could we put a pin in these, that this is something for us to talk about? How do we get a mechanism, make a recommendation to make a mechanism that this gets updated like that this gets analyzed every 3 years or something? Because again, this is a lot smaller than rules. And maybe we need to, can we make a pin in that, that we make a recommendation around that, so that we're not waiting until Justin's 80 to do it again, since he was 9 the last time somebody's.
Yes, great call out, Heather. Thank you. Janice.
Yeah, this relates to a recommendation that came out of the tab 1 group, which is that reporting be consolidated and duplicative or no longer relevant reports be removed. We have heard a lot of discussion about the fact that that's happened, but I don't know that I've seen any concrete evidence that it is actually in effect yet. So it's another put a pin put a pin in it, major follow-up item, because I think there are people submitting reports right now based on rules that don't even apply anymore. They're going on a shelf, no one's reading them. And what I heard from OHA staff who were working on this subject is that they identified some, I don't remember the number, 180 duplicative reports that was part of a project. And I don't know that we've heard any more about efforts to get somewhere with that. And we're still submitting reports. So this is going to come up for every rule you look at, for every statute.
Go ahead, Samantha.
Thanks. And Janice is right. I completely agree with what was just said. And I'm glad Molly brought up that point as well earlier. But to the TABS recommendation, the original TABS recommendations from January 2023, project plan number 10 is about a listening session that OHA agreed to have every year after we finish these processes so that we can also bring things forward. And then it really be a listening session, not a teaching session, so that they're able to take in the feedback and we can identify, I think, where things are broken. And I think we're really going to have to make sure that project moves forward and that all of these changes get considered there to make that most fruitful as possible.
Thank you.
Well, it sounds like maybe some kind of a tracker too, because that frequently is the challenge, especially when people have really heavy workloads. So that there's a way for folks to know, here's what we said in the list, here are the recommendations that were made in a listening session. Here are the ones that have been addressed. Here are the ones that have not been addressed. Here's why it can't be addressed. Just so that there's some kind of centralized running list and people don't feel like I keep saying the same thing over and over and I don't know if it's changed or it hasn't changed.
Completely agree with that.
Yeah, and Danielle, see your comment in the chat as well. Thank you for that. Yeah, flagging sort of how are we going to organize that. And Janice, that's good. And we will make sure we get our hands on that.
Yeah, I know that there certainly is one around CCO reporting. Is that what you're thinking, Janice, or there's something very specific for
No, it's very specific. It was work that was completed by OHA staff who participated in the tab 1. And it was super hopeful at the time, and we've just not heard hide nor hair of it since. And so it was a lot of work on the part of the agency, and very concrete progress could result from that, of not having to submit redundant reports.
Excellent.
Go ahead, Heather.
And then along with the committees, the reports, they're also a way to look at, because it's in here, directories, because folks are having to update directories and there are many, many, many disconnected directories that could be probably analyzed for potential consolidation. So that'll come.
Samantha.
To the point about the report that Janice just called up, that was Steve Westberg's team and Gina Mason's team that did that report. And Steve was on the call earlier, but it looks like he dropped off. But maybe we could ask them for an update at a future meeting. They've both been wonderful friends of the tab throughout.
Awesome. Thanks, Samantha.
And I see Dave's chat as well. Thanks, Dave. Okay. We were down. Okay. Anything on 366? Anne?
You know, we may just have the same comment on all of these, like we're just not sure it's happening if it needs to be in here anymore. So
okay, I mean that's yeah. Go for it.
Can we just say ditto on the next couple if that's
absolutely
okay?
Yeah.
Is that okay with folks? I mean, if people want to go one by one, it's cool.
Yeah, I want to echo Ann on that. Like, if nobody's actually using this for their day-to-day work, then let's just get rid of all of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think we heard like that somebody actually, Molly, like somebody is actually using making a report here where other people think, no, that doesn't exist anymore. So I think there is some clarification of if it's not happening anymore, but then somebody may still be submitting a report. And I think that's part of the challenge folks are experiencing. And so we can certainly if people just say, and that's sort of, and people can just say, yep, same. And I see, we're then uncovering a couple of gems here about, but I'm still doing that kind of thing. And please.
And maybe somebody from the health authority can jump in. Are you all still receiving these reports and using them? Like, I don't want to go after something that you're all like, this is very useful, we're using it.
This is Sissy. I just don't think, we don't have everybody here, right, represented. So we don't necessarily know all the information, but we can take it back.
Sissy, we can make a combined list of here are the items that were identified by the group as, just being unsure if they're relevant anymore.
Yeah. And, however, John, Krista, and Dave want that to be processed, I would defer to them, but I can just say that I don't think with the few of us that are here that we could confirm something wasn't needed.
Great, thank you. Janice.
Sorry. So I think we run into this often is, I don't want Sissy to have to do extra work. The list exists now. So the question really is, how do we make that list result in some definitive action that reduces the number of reports? I mean, the team that did that work did a beautiful job, and they were very engaged, and they identified reports that are redundant, not necessary, no longer required. So Sissy, yeah, you're welcome, Sissy. I mean, I think you're off the hook because the report exists. And Dave, it looks like your group did a report and reduced some reporting. So I think we just want to know what happened with, and Dave, sorry, I'm calling you out in the chat, but I think you're talking about a different analysis than the one I'm talking about, or is it the same?
I don't think it's the one that you referenced.
Yeah.
But based on some of the admin burden discussions that were had at the first tab, one of the things that we initiated relating to the CCOs was in evaluating all the requirements, all the contractual requirements we have for CCOs. And that's where we were able to reduce a significant number.
Yeah, great. And I think that's the kind of action that we're really talking about. And maybe John has an answer.
Go for it, John.
Yeah, we're reviewing that stuff still and making major revisions to the CFAA right now, which would not require certain reports. Most of the reports aren't required unless they're in contract anyway. So that's where the change will end up occurring. It doesn't really matter if they're listed in statute or not, because if we're not funding it through the contract, they're not required to be reported.
Right, and then thank you so much, Sean. And then I saw Justin's comment in the chat about maybe there's, what sections are still relevant or not. John, that goes exactly to your point. Go ahead, Justin.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, even if they're not being required, if it's something that was written in the 70s, like, let's take this opportunity to clean it up, right? I think that was part of the charge here.
Yes.
So I think if OHA could screen these things to say, we haven't required this in 20 years, we haven't required this in 10 years, oh, we're still requiring this, and this is still tied to this funding, that would be really good for, just to be documented somewhere, right? So a group 10 years from now that's not us knows why or when things stop being relevant in the statute. And then I think it's aligned with what Janice's goals are, to look at reporting requirements and cut down on duplication or unnecessary reports or whatever. But I mean, part of the charge here is to go through and clean up this statute. So I just don't want to lose sight of that.
Okay, thank you. And that's something we can certainly talk with the health authority about, and they're hearing all of this. Heather.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, and like, I know there's little bits and pieces between 368 and 380 that probably are better placed or already written down in a new way in the 414s and in the responsibilities of the Medicaid plan and also how counties do things. So I think this is a really great, like Justin just said, a really great place where we could do a lot of subtraction.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm hearing that this section, I'll go to 380 in a second, that these all are the same, may or may not be relevant given what exists in the 414s. And then question about anything in this section, or is that the same situation? And saying same situation. Cheryl, please.
I would be hesitant to take out 430, 380 because that is a formula funding mechanism that we still use for non-Medicaid funded services. So I don't want to keep that until we figure that out. Now, granted, a lot of funding, the marijuana tax revenue got shifted to another fund, as we all know, but there are still beer and wine, other substances that are taxed and put in this account. So I wouldn't want to get rid of it.
Is there, Cheryl, just to follow up, is there updating that needs to happen on this section from your perspective?
I'd like to take a look at it with my members and probably the Association of Oregon Counties too.
Great, thank you. Heather.
Yeah, that was my question for Cheryl. Just curious, like, will this get wrapped up maybe in the part 1 of the 4092 and the CFA agreement, or no? Not at all. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Cheryl, if we could, that would be great to then come back to this, but we've lifted it up as something that needs to be looked at. Great. Thank you. All right. This is referring to a number above. Okay, anything here? Okay, now this says temporary provisions relating to opioid settlement prevention, treatment, and recovery fund.
You should skip that.
John, you think? Go ahead. Heather, is that what you were going to say too? Folks agree? Anybody have concern about skipping this section? Okay, I'm getting thumbs up. Okay, so then I don't want to zip past. Then we're here. Is that correct? This is the next section. Okay. 43383.
I think that's the same part as the one above.
It is. Well, yeah, it is. No. So this says Drug Addiction Treatment and Recovery Act, which may or
110.
Oh, this is 110. Okay, so what do you want to do about that? Skip. Others? Voting members? Yeah. Anybody have a concern?
I noticed in 2A, it says by removing criminal penalties for low-level drug possession, which is what we just did last session. So
right. That needs to be updated for sure, Jessica. I think we got to figure that out. But not the task of this group, but maybe we could flag. Thank you. Okay. And I'm going to keep going. Burns, lots of stuff here. Does anybody know where this stops? Let's see.
Go back up. I think it's voluntary admission. Is that all part of the same thing?
Which one? Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Sorry.
It's okay. No, and this is, Kathy and I did not want to go through. We did not feel like we should go through and say, skip this. It's measure 110, right? Like
I'm not sure 397 and further is 110. I think there's a cutoff there.
Thank you. Miscellaneous. Yep. Thank you. That's what I needed. Okay, so we're at 397.
I think this is taken care of in contracts and CCOs as this is old language from prior to CCOs.
Okay.
Unless there's a reason for counties or CMHPs in their contract, but it's in their contracts with providers.
So you're saying it's outdated, Heather, and covered elsewhere. Okay. Is that the same for 399? Or anybody have a comment on 399?
Is there anything we need to be just mindful of for the fee-for-service population?
This is really part of the ORS and the ASAM rules. And now that we have medical necessity, I think we need to really take a peek just to make sure that we don't miss like one sentence that's really important. But
well, and my comment's going to be with the carceral setting stuff coming up. This may change anyway, because it's going to change our responsibilities there. So I do think we need to flag this one because I'm not sure it's accurate anymore.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and an opportunity to roll in, like Ann said, the waiver.
Perfect. Thank you.
So maybe the waiver doesn't belong in statute.
All right. And then we have 401. May need updating. Because it references, okay.
Yeah, I would maybe be careful about that. That I think provides some indemnity language for the system around making decisions for folks who need sobering.
Great.
Yeah, this is very important to stay in there.
So stay in there. Does it need updating, Amy or Jessica? Or is it fine as is? If it's fine as is.
I think it's fine as is, and I think it's going to change a little bit when the 2024 session stuff gets incorporated. So,
thank you. Okay, and then 402. Okay. Moving to this section, sorry. 405, 430, 405.
I think the same comment for other definitions.
Got it. Thank you. So this is more definitions and terms or findings. This is finding, I guess. What about 430, 420?
Not sure if anybody relies on that language.
Anybody?
Like I'm assuming community justice has its own, they probably have their own rules and their own language, and I'm not sure if this.
I can check in with my folks. I haven't heard anybody complaining about it, but I don't know how relevant it is either. I'll check.
That'd be terrific, Jessica. Thank you. Go ahead, Molly.
Yeah, I think it needs to be a quick flyover with the local public safety coordinating councils, and where those, which is an entirely different section of the ORS. So I would help Jessica. I'll take a look at this as well.
Thank you so much. All right. We are down to 43422. Anything on this? All right. I'm seeing some chats. Thanks. I'm just catching up on them. All right. All right. I'm sorry. Here we're here. All right. Anything on 426?
I mean, on this one, it hasn't been updated since 2005. I guess, is this still relevant?
Yeah, I think we have to ask that.
Yeah, that would be my question. Has there been any gifts or donations? Maybe this was put in because somebody wanted to do that. I don't know. I mean, it's not a bad thing to allow them to have a mechanism for receiving those if they are awarded.
Great. Thank you. All right. Diversion programs. Oops. So this is definitions.
I noticed that it refers in 2 or 3 places to county mental health programs, and it seems like it should be congruent with other places in statute and read community mental health programs.
Thanks so much, Jessica. So the same thing, so look at that and any other, and looking for consistency and updated language in case that is the case here. Okay. Anything on 43455?
This one doesn't seem really applicable anymore. This one seems really old. So I don't even know if this is, we even need this anymore.
This whole section on treatment program, this section or just this one, Anne?
455, typically the cops are not, shuttling people to treatment anymore. So this seems old.
Okay, thank you.
Well, they're about ready to shovel folks to treatment more with deflection, I think, potentially. But again, like that makes this language old.
Yep, so maybe this is right. Okay. Anything on, oh, please.
And I was just going to say, and they're not doing it. So there's that.
Yeah.
So, and Christy's comment, I just want to say, Christy, I'm not, this is not that I don't want them to be aware. I just don't know if this is the way it's happening anymore. If it's not happening like this anymore, we need to drop these statutes or update them.
Honestly, it never has.
And Justin, stop saying stuff like that. I was alive when this was updated. So quick.
Yeah, Justin, you're making us feel old. Stop it.
I think that's his point.
I think so too.
I
was
guess
just gonna
make
say,
sure it
I
exists
concur
someplace.
with.
They're in rules. If it doesn't belong here, it needs to belong somewhere. So, in my opinion.
Yeah, like, is this, I guess my question to our criminal justice partners, is this in some of your other statute? Because this is really more about back in the old days when we didn't do things by medical necessity criteria with Medicaid, and maybe there's enough coverage of this rights and responsibilities in that. I'm not an expert in that area and I don't know. So that's my question to other people.
So I'm gonna go to Molly and then I want to go to Deborah's comment in the chat. Go ahead, Molly.
So I think there's two things. I think it actually is in the Measure 110 work is really where this is the focus, and really the driving is around making sure that our system heads back to the Measure 110 work that we just skipped. The other is I think that there is a statement that can be made, but this is old. This is not, I don't think, accurate or correct currently. It would need to be reworded.
Thanks, Molly. Deborah, you said I'd like to know if these sections have to do with public safety need input from law enforcement, DAs, and public defense. Is that something you could take on to get that input?
That we don't the courts are not them. We're a different branch. So
no,
this
I'm not asking you to know.
You need these folks at the table. They're not providers. They're public servants that need to be at this table.
Yeah,
so that's just
right. And you'll recall we talked about this last time, and I know the steering committee and others really shared the concern and had some conversation about how to make sure that they do bring those folks around the table wherever it makes sense, as opposed to for the entire process. So this is clearly one of those areas.
And then also seeing Alcohol Drug Policy Commission. And I know that we already did flag some statutes for that group. And then Heather's chiming in about sending this to CJC for comments too, to make sure we're engaging those folks. And I see lots of nodding heads about that. All right, Justin, thanks. Okay, go ahead, Molly. Oh, no, you're good. Okay, Amy.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think part of the challenge is that the different entities, they have their own set of rules and they're familiar with those rules, but we don't necessarily cross-check each other's rules. So I can tell you local law enforcement is not going in and looking at behavioral health rules to see what they're supposed to do and not supposed to do. And so they're not doing this. I don't think they've ever done, anywhere I've worked, they've never done this. And so if we were going to do this, like it would be like doing a whole new, even aside from the whole deflection thing, it would be like doing a whole new initiative all over again. You can't, just because it's in rule, it doesn't mean people are going to follow it, if that makes sense. So we can keep it in writing, but it doesn't mean that suddenly people are going to start doing it. That's just, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, I see a number of comments in the chat about this. And again, if we come back to what Rep. Knost was sharing about administrative simplification, part of that is streamlining and reducing duplication. Go ahead, Justin.
Is Sissy still here? I'm curious, is this the whole ADIS, does this set the precedent for the whole ADIS process?
I am still here, but I just walked away and just got back.
Oh.
I apologize.
I'm just trying to figure out if this is the section of statute that really established the ADIS stuff. Heather's shaking her head. You don't think so?
I think the ADIS stuff is in the Dewey section. There's a whole section in here related to Dewey. So I think this is just really old. There's newer ADIS Dewey stuff. Yeah.
I'll make a note, Justin, to cross-reference.
Guys, this is optional stuff. It says the person making the arrest may, which means they can do it if they want to or not. So I don't know. I think you're spending a lot of time on something you don't need to.
Thanks, John. Okay. Anything, we're going to keep going. Is this relevant to this? Well, what about 460? I don't want to jump ahead of you. $465. $470. Oops. Anything on 475?
I think we just need to flag this all for,
Right.
Again, this doesn't seem
Doesn't
relevant
belong here. Okay.
Right.
Do others agree? Any disagreement with that? That this, and Jessica said it in the chat too, this whole section should be pulled. It does not belong here. Okay. So I'm going to go down. I think we're right here. Administration. Done. $535.
I wonder with 535, it says subject to availability of funds. I think this might be something to have, perhaps, I don't know, flagged so that we can have a bare minimum of X specific languages that are mandated make the funds. I'm sorry, but we have X amount of people percentage wise that don't just speak English that should prioritize funds to have the documents rather than if we have extra funds, maybe. But I don't know if that might be, this is where we should have that.
Thanks, Jessica. Go ahead, Anne. Let's see what other folks have to say about this. Anne, you're on mute.
Sorry, I think this is old stuff because CCOs and everybody else are required to translate forms. So I would be surprised if the Oregon Health Authority didn't have more requirements than what is laid out in here. I just think this feels really old, and somebody from the Health Authority may be able to speak to that. All their equity programs seems like this would have taken care of that.
Go ahead, Janice.
The term subject to availability of funds was a huge topic of conversation in the contract negotiations with the Health Authority and the community mental health providers. So it's tricky to take it out. I totally get what you're saying, Jessica. We're required to do that to some degree by federal law. I don't even know that we need a requirement in the rule. So I am not a fan of taking out anywhere in the rules, anywhere where they still exist, the terminology subject to the availability of funds, especially as someone who's now been in a more rural county who may have less resources available. And where there are mandates that supersede these anyway, around access for people with language needs. So just giving a little of the context.
Thanks, Janice. So, okay, so we'll flag this. We'll see, don't want to take anything out that would impact in the way that Janice talked about. And we want to be sure if this is somewhere else or old that there's, and if this language is captured elsewhere, to be mindful of that. Anything on 540?
Just another one that it's old, and we don't normally designate sites for evaluation of individuals. Like this is old. It seems like we're out hunting people.
What about 545? Okay. 550.
I think all of these are related to the diversion programs, right? Up above.
They may be, yeah.
So I mean, maybe they're old, but they're not sort of just hanging out there on their own. They're.
Let's see. Now I've lost where we were. Hold on. Kathy, which one were we on? 430 which?
535
Thank you.
was the last one I have notes on.
Okay, so you're thinking these might all go up to diversion, and that's what you're thinking, Jessica. Okay, so we will apply that to the whole thing. Now we're at drug treatment. So the whole idea of if it exists somewhere else, we want to avoid duplication. We don't want to take out language that has current relevance, but we want to streamline to both avoid duplication and to make sure everything's current. Okay, drug treatment programs. This is a new header. Anything on 560? Okay. What about 565?
Sorry, is 560 still relevant? I mean, the requirement that you can only use let's see, I'm just reading some of the language. It just seems like it has really outdated treatment language in there too. I mean, the field has moved on from some of that.
Thanks, Janice. Go ahead, Heather.
I'm just going to concur with Janice. Like, detoxification is not the appropriate word. Some of the terminology around the process is not quite right anymore. But there's some other little things that are important here and there. So this is one we need to flag for, like, is this better situated under CCO contracts, and how do we do it with the other contracted monies, as John mentioned, to make sure that if we are making recommendations around this, we're not missing a funding stream requirement, or does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the example is you can only provide synthetic opiates when detox with acupuncture and counseling has proven ineffective. And I don't think that's even evidence-based or current practice anywhere. And so it's just really outdated.
Well, and it's actually against good treatment. And it actually is against some legislation that just passed.
Yeah, right.
Recently.
Which requires us to make it available. Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually against parity. it's step therapy. So yeah, it even is out of compliance with the parity legislation that NAMI and others of us supported. So,
and is that just 460 or this more the other ones as well?
I think it's just I mean, that one's very explicitly out of date, but I think if a careful read of all of these is going to identify a ton of language about applications of treatment that don't even apply anymore, and in fact may be against what's currently mandated. That's just one that I can catch in reading on a screen, the fine print.
Yep. Thank you.
I think it's the little SUD subgroup.
Yeah, no, great point. Thank you, Heather. So anything else? And then I want to be sure any voting members who haven't spoken up, if you have anything you'd like to add to what we've been talking about. So we've heard that some of this whole section may need updating on drug treatment programs. I'm just going to keep going through if there's anything on 565.
I guess I would say this whole section probably needs to be reviewed against current treatment standards. Some of this is from 2009. There's no way it's not going to be out of date.
Yep.
Well, and can we pin this, that is this really in the right spot? It's very granular for statute. It's just my thought that this is pretty this almost looks like old rules language in a lot of ways, some of it. Just saying. Okay.
Good question, good flag. Anything else? So there's a thought that this whole section needs to be compared against current treatment, latest evidence-based treatment. Does anybody want to say anything about from 570?
I would say 570. This is Heather. Sorry, 572. That's one of those directory ones. There's multiple, so I don't know if that's one to consolidate where directories are required, and how they're required.
Great, thank you.
And does the language about location of methadone clinics even apply anymore? That's 43590.
So that's a question, Janice, if this is outdated, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of medically assisted treatment being administered, and if it's, I don't know that these, I have never encountered that these space or location rules are being thought about consciously or applied currently, but I may not know.
I think we should research that.
Yeah.
Before we scratch it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are people in the community that would care about this one, and I'm just curious about whether it applies now.
Yep. Samantha.
Just seconding what Janice and Amy are saying in the CCO conversation, that also came up, and asking if it was broad enough, or just like currently what's the best representation of what we're currently doing. So versus elimination, just what are we currently doing? And we don't usually call out specific treatments, so should it be broader than that?
There are specific rules around methadone clinics that are dictated by federal rules, so that's what all this is associated with. Just leave this alone, please.
And John, does this impact the administration of other medically assisted? Because a lot of people providing medically assisted treatment are doing other substances other than methadone, but may also do methadone.
No, this is strictly for methadone as a treatment for opiate addiction.
Okay.
And they're federal rules.
OTP is separate than if you were just doing the MAT.
Pardon?
The OTP is certified differently than if it were just the Medicaid assisted treatment.
Yeah. And I think to John's comment, like John was saying, the ADPC is making a whole bunch of recommendations around OPTs and was charged to do so this last session. So there'll probably be a lot of recommendations coming out of the ADPC around OPTs and expansion of OPTs. And also the feds are changing a whole bunch of stuff right now. They just changed some stuff and they're in the process of changing some more stuff.
Okay.
Okay. We skipped 573. I wanted to see if anybody had anything on 573. Jessica Pratt.
I am just curious, since I wasn't here in 2017, if anyone remembers the origin of this. And John, maybe if you happen to know off the top of your head, what those numbers have looked like in the last 7 or 8 years that we've theoretically been tracking. I don't have a strong opinion. I just find this curious.
Yeah, I don't. I'd have to talk with somebody like John McElveen in our office.
It seems like if this isn't necessary or useful to anyone, that it's an administrative burden we could take off of OHA, depending on what the numbers show.
Go ahead, Heather. Thanks, Anne.
John McElveen just presented this to the ADPC, Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission, and it's been part of the State Opioid Settlement Board's analysis of funding. So we still have deserts, so there's still quite a bit of expansion that needs to happen for OPTs across the state to deal with the fentanyl crisis. So I think, like I said before, I think that a lot of that work is happening through the ADPC recommendations and some of the requirements that they're going to do. So I think that's a partner. Maybe we need to partner with them.
Yep.
A partner moment.
Yeah, that's come up a number of times already about what they're doing and how do we not duplicate their work and how do they take, sort of make sure that they're getting input into this. So that's definitely a bucket of work.
And the buprenorphine, there used to have to be a registry, and now that's gone because the feds removed the waiver requirement. So there's other things in there too, that, like John said, Dr. McElveen and then the ADPC working on it, that probably, is this really needed? Is it in the right spot? I don't know. Those would be things I'd lean into there.
Okay. Jessica, please.
Just looking at how there's now this new header starting with local mental health development disability stuff. So we basically had a call out header for treatment services that had nothing to do with anything other than methadone and opioid. So this is piecemeal stuff. So there needs to be like one section that includes alcohol, which may be a subset of Dewey. I mean, whatever it is, but it's just kind of in weird places. So I think those need to be connected.
Amen.
Great comment. Thanks, Jessica. So we are coming to this new section. We have about 7 minutes. So I think we should, Kathy, tell me if you disagree, maybe stop here. So we're and just take a moment to, you'll get an email from us that this is where we stopped and this is where we'll start. And wanted to, before we sort of go down this road, because it's a big section and I think we'll need some time with it, and I'd rather have it as a holistic discussion rather than talk about like the first 2 statute sections of the statute and then come back to it. Wanted to just check in with all of you as we wrap up, because we're trying, we want to be sure this is working. And we did this last time too, is just to take a couple of minutes to reflect on this process. I know it's takes some time and attention and focus, and want to just make sure that we're still good proceeding this way. I think we're getting more of the check, this doesn't belong here, this is duplicative. I think we have to continue to be mindful about what's administrative burden and how do we define that versus I'm just like, what's an overhaul of the behavioral health system, or right? And so just wanting, like, I suspect, and Kathy, please chime in if I'm off base here, but I suspect that we're going to have things that are called out that this came up. This may not be directly related to administrative burden, but this came up and we want to flag it. But then, so we're not going to lose all of this stuff. And I just want to be mindful that, yes, flagging everything. Yep. And so we can, if it has to go in a different bucket, we can put it in a different bucket. So just want a couple of reflections on what folks are thinking. Janice, please.
Actually, mine is a little cleanup work. I put it in the chat, but I just wanted to apologize to Christy, who called me out on really coming across, when I listened to my words in my own head back, it sounded pretty condescending to people with lived experience. And no, Christy, thank you. Thank you for saying it. I have family members of my own, colleagues, who are brilliant and amazing and lovely and would run circles around me in a rulemaking group. So I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Janice.
Yeah.
Amy Baker.
I appreciate that this group doesn't want to take on overhauling the behavioral health system, because that's a pretty cumbersome task. I do think that as we go down into some of this stuff, there's a lot of duplication because of the lack of clarity around what the various roles are. So there's gonna be some of that. Like, yes. I don't necessarily know how to avoid that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Amy. This role's responsibilities is a key conversation.
Yeah. But even in this initial review where we're just flagging stuff, you're already elevating some cross-cutting thing, like having a clearer picture in our heads about what all the committee requirements are right now and then what they should be. And then the same with reporting and the same with consumer advisory representation, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, some of these things are more than just fixing outdated terms.
Yeah. Anything else, Heather, please?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, to your comment, Kathy, like consolidating meetings, consolidating reporting, those are huge administrative burdens for our members. We have members who, and I don't think it's unique to anyone here, who, you know, they're very lean on the operations and supervisor side, and those are the people who often have the expertise to go to those meetings. They're spending on average 5 to 6 to 10
Huge, yeah.
15 hours a month. And that's not even talking about the racks that are happening right now that Janice talked about earlier. So doing this work is super meaningful because those supervisors need to be available to do the work with people and do supervision and be clinical.
Right. So heavy burden getting in the way of care, and then lots of requirements and rules that are not necessarily resulting in better quality or a better process for consumers, et cetera. So no matter what lens you're using, lots of room for improvement.
Look, I just have a kind of dumb question. Is there in this, how can we encourage OHA at some point to pick a moment in time and sweep back through? I mean, I'm mindful, you know, I think Sissy led part of this process, but they did this big update of the 309s. I thought that was an exceptional process, but we haven't done that since then. We just keep piling on top of it. And it feels like a lot of this frustration is bubbling over because we keep doing that. And I'm with everybody else. I'm fatigued by the rules. Every time I turn around, some other part of OHA is putting out rules. And I'm wondering, do you guys know that this other part's putting out rules? And I don't know if there's a strategy in this process for that, or a recommendation to every X number of years, you do something more comprehensive.
Yeah, and that came up for sure, Chris, I think earlier today, about is there some, do you all make a recommendation about that? And
we did.
I just found, well, I don't know, in the tab thing, we said stop, we said examine burden, but we never quite said, hey, go through this whole process somewhat like you did. I mean, I'm sure for the agency, that's a mammoth endeavor. I mean, that was a whole week. It was a mammoth endeavor for me. I'm sure for some of the people in this room who participated in that, it was a mammoth endeavor. But I did find it a worthwhile endeavor. And the sort of piecemeal, rule by rule, which is going on now, and it's really an avalanche today, given all that the authority is trying to do on so many fronts. It just is complicating things. I don't think they intend to complicate things the way they're complicating things, and it signals to me it's time to sort of pause and do something more comprehensive.
Go ahead, Sissy.
I raised my hand on this, so thank you for acknowledging that. Thank you, Chris. And sort of like this, I'll say that perhaps that might be a recommendation, is that there is a concentrated effort around the behavioral health OARs, where y'all might know specifically, like, is there a person in charge of it? Is there a subject matter expert? Just some governance around it, staffing. Anything that would be in this recommendation that might help us get there, I think we would appreciate as well.
Great. All right, folks. Thank you. Really appreciate your attention, your focus. And you'll be hearing from us, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Take care.